Welcome to the Cover 2 Zone. We are grading every AFC team's 2024 season. We're going to get straight into it. We're going to go alphabetical order, starting with the Baltimore Ravens. Eden, I've given them an A-, the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously came into this year for getting Derrick Henry. What a pickup in the offseason. I mean, he ends up with 1,921 yards, just an absolute monster on that team. And I think that really a piece that they were missing. I think there's questions about receivers as well, but I think Zay Flowers has stepped up into that number one receiver role quite nicely. Obviously having Mark Andrews an elite tight end, but Isaiah Likely really stepped up to complement him as well when he's had injuries. And most rushing yards of any team this season. Lamar Jackson had an MVP caliber year, arguably was the MVP, and he's just so dangerous, isn't he, when that dual threat, and he's a good passer as well. And I think it's, the way they started, they were absolutely brilliant. And I think this is the most talented team in the NFL, personally, right? You may disagree with that. I love what they have on the defensive side as well. The defense, they struggled to create a few turnovers. This year they were 30. They got 31 last year and only 17 this year, so they'll be disappointed with that. But this defense, you're always going to get a defense in Baltimore that's going to play harder. Some of the pieces: Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Van Noy had 12.5 sacks as well. You're always going to get a defense in Baltimore, and with this offense that they've now got, they've put it together. But obviously the caveat to all of that is they choked in the playoffs again, and they couldn't get it done in the playoffs.
I don't know how Mark Andrews is going to survive next season. I think he's really got to be gone. Isaiah Likely, like you said, had a
gone.
Yeah, Isaiah Likely had a great season. This guy bottled it for them in the playoffs. Move him on elsewhere. I think. You're saying the most talented team in the NFL. I think they do have a little bit of a ceiling. I think Lamar and Derrick Henry is great rushing attack, but passing attack is still, there's a lot to be desired there. Baltimore's always got a great defense and will always have a great defense. Lamar's just, honestly, such a fun player to watch. Really great player, but has just not done it in the playoffs. Now, this season was not his fault. It was Mark Andrews' fault, which, I mean, yeah, he great player, but he really bottled it for them. And I think I'd probably grade their season based off hype as a B+. They had huge hype coming in. The acquisition of Derrick Henry, people knew that kind of read option would be ridiculous. Their run game would be ridiculous, but they didn't get over the hump, and that's what they need to do to become that A-tier sort of team.
Yeah, they definitely need to go to that next level, but I think it is a testament to the coaching that they have in Baltimore. I mean, John Harbaugh's been there now since 2008, 2009, I think, something like that, that we say year on year, when they had guys like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, it was one of the consistently best defenses in the NFL. And they've managed to carry that on through different cycles of their team. Like, those guys are far gone now from this team, and they've still managed to keep that culture of just having a very, very good defense in that team. And I think that's a testament to the coaching. So when I say that they're the most talented team, I think that the good coaching comes into that as well. Yeah. I think that the good coaching creates that talent as well as the players having that raw talent. That's kind of why I say I think they're the most talented team. And I think as you said, they are one of the most fun to watch. Lamar Jackson is box office. Derrick Henry is box office. He was in Tennessee even when they were struggling. And the other parts that I think Zay Flowers has stepped up, and the O-line was great, and they're gonna have a huge say next year, I think. And you go B. What was it? B+. I got an A-, so we're about the same on there. So let's move on to the Buffalo Bills.
I do just want to say Mark Andrews probably won't get shipped. He is a blocking tight end from now on, because Isaiah Likely's that receiving tight end for them. Mark Andrews, just stay being a right tackle and you'll be all right.
You'd hope for all he's done for that organization. He's got a bit more cash in the bank. But we'll move on to the Buffalo Bills, and I'll let you go first on this because I don't really want to talk about this team that I hate so much. So
I know they fell short, but I'd give the Buffalo Bills an A for this season. I think when you looked at the weapons Josh Allen had at the start of the season, you go, this team's going to not be up there. Obviously, with Josh Allen, you knew they'd always be competitive. But, I mean, he's thrown, to Mac Hollins. And is Dalton Kincaid third year now? He didn't really take the step up we were hoping for. I think they lost Gabe Davis in the offseason. Lost Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis is actually woeful, so that just proves that Josh Allen really makes his wide receivers great. The kid is special. There's a reason he won MVP. Their defense could have been better, but overall was pretty solid. I think they're just struggling to get over that Chiefs. The Chiefs are just their bogey team at the end of the day, and I think they're a great team. Josh Allen is the future of the NFL. I think he's fantastic and will continue being the future of the NFL. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he surpasses Mahomes in terms of evaluating him as a sole player as the best quarterback of this decade, because I think he's not been as lucky to have the team around him Mahomes has had. I think he's special.
We'll get into that when we talk about Kansas City, but he's definitely special. And you know, when he came into the league, I'll be honest, I thought, this guy ain't it. This guy,
he's a scrub.
Let's be honest. I did think he's a scrub. He made way too many mistakes. He was inconsistent, but the step up he has taken in the last 3 or 4 years or so, it is unbelievable. And as you say, he's MVP this year. He's right up there with the face of the league now. He's on arguably the most talented, or one of the most talented teams in the league. And another piece that really stepped up this year for this team was James Cook. He had 16 touchdowns versus 2 last year. Really, really key for them when they're punching it in close to the goal line. They could get it done because James Cook had a great year. As you mentioned, traded away Stephon Diggs last year, and you know there's not a. They brought in Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper, mate.
I quite like Amari Cooper, but he's not an elite wide receiver. He's a solid mid-level receiver. He was in Dallas, and yeah, as he said, this team, they had big aspirations. Their Super Bowl window is now, and they just can't get past the Chiefs at the moment. But they are coming really, really close, as much as it pains me to say. I love, my favorite day of the year is that celebratory Monday for me when the Bills inevitably lose in the playoffs. That's a great Monday for me. But unfortunately, I'm not sure whether I'm going to have that Monday next year, because they are a serious, serious contender now. And it's the only thing really that they're left to do is make a Super Bowl now and win it. So I've given them an A-, just because they are Super Bowl ready now, and they should be winning the Super Bowl. They are good enough to win the Super Bowl, and they obviously didn't even get to the Super Bowl. So they're going to be disappointed with that, but still a really, really good season from the Bills.
I think it shows, Josh Allen shows exactly why NFL teams draft traits and not what they did in college.
Yeah.
I thought he would be terrible coming in. He looked awful at Wyoming. You saw a big, strong guy, a huge arm, and that was kind of it. But they've molded him into, I mean, it took him a few years, but they've molded him into the best quarterback in the NFL. And they're reaping the reward of that, really.
Yeah. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. So finished 9-8, third in the AFC North. This is where it takes a turn. We've had two good teams to start us off. I've given the Bengals a C-. They went 0-3 and then won 5 in a row at the end of the season to kind of get their record back up to being respectable and having a winning record. I mean, this was a crazy year for the Bengals. Joe Burrow has a career year, and they only win 9 games, 5 of which coming at the end of the season. I mean, they were 4-8 before those last 5 games. When Joe Burrow, I'm looking at the stat sheet here, just under 5,000 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 108.5. I mean, just an unbelievable year from him. But the rest of the team, especially the defense, terrible. I mean, 8th most yards allowed, 7th most points allowed, 25.5 points allowed a game. And this is not that was not because of the offense putting them in bad spots. That's the defense conceding. There was a lot of noise in the off season in Cincinnati. DJ Reader went, and there was a lot of noise about people being unhappy there, unhappy with ownership, unhappy with coaching. I didn't like it in the off season, and this came true. I think they were lucky to win 9 games in the end, if I'm being totally honest. And, the fall from grace with this team from reaching the Super Bowl not that long ago, keeping their franchise quarterback, Joe Burrow, healthy, him having his best year yet, and it's still being let down. The talent is there with this team. They've got one of the best wide receivers, one of the best arguably the best 2 receiver as well in the end. T. Higgins is a number 1 receiver on a lot of other teams, and they've got pieces on the offense, and the defense this year really, really let this team down.
Mike Brown, Cincinnati's owner, is the Daniel Levy of the NFL.
They don't have a GM. They don't have a GM,
and they don't spend money. And it's a shame. Yes, Joe Burrow, huge contract, Chase, huge contract. But the team around him, it is actually like Tottenham. It's like Kane and Son, and then Højbjerg and Ben Davies. What are you going to do with that? I think I'd give, as individuals, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase A's. The rest of the team, C-, B. Yeah. I mean, I think I saw Joe Burrow put up multiple 33-plus point games, and they still lost. And yes, I think they had a few injuries, but at the end of the day, they need to build a better defense. They've tried to build an O-line for Joe Burrow, and they did play well on offense this year, but their defense was horrendous, and they started off slow. They always seem to start off slow. I don't know. With the talent that Joe Burrow is and Jamar Chase, is Zach Taylor on the hot seat? If they start slow again next season and it's the same thing over and over again, I mean, you're just wasting this guy's career. Yeah. So I'd give overall D+, C-, but Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase A.
Yeah, and I think you might have to caveat that a little bit in they're probably in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL right now when you've got the Ravens and the Steelers in there. But they lost games to teams that they should be beating. As you mentioned, they always seem to start slow, and 4-8 before those last 5 games is just not good enough for this team. And that noise in the offseason, I didn't like it coming in. And it proved to be right. That there's too much noise there. I don't know whether it's Zach Brown's fault. I think there are other issues, but you do have to look at the coaching definitely. And not good enough for the Bengals fans.
They got rid of the DC, but that felt like a scapegoat move, to be honest. The defense overall isn't talented enough. And they've lost key pieces this offseason as well.
Yeah. Moving over to the other side of Ohio, and the other team in this division, the Cleveland Steamers, the Cleveland Browns. You want to take the lead on this one?
They stink. They stink. Oh, it's just like the most depressed franchise in the NFL, and that's coming from a Jags fan.
I feel sorry for their fans. I really do.
I mean, you move on from Baker and he becomes a stud. You bring in this guy who enjoys massages a little too much, and he doesn't know how to throw the ball anymore. He's clearly, I think, all the headlines has gotten to his head, and it's a shame because I think their coaching staff is pretty good. They do have really good pieces, but yeah, the quarterback's a calamity. Receivers, okay. We thought Nick Chubb coming back. It's hard to put faith in a guy who's coming off a major injury halfway through the season, and by that point, the season was done. You can see why Myles Garrett wanted to move on. He's obviously got a huge contract now. They need to move. They just need to find their quarterback, whether that's drafting Shedeur Sanders this season. But overall, I don't think there was that much hype going into the season for Cleveland. I'd probably give them a C-. I think that seems fair. And like you were saying about Cincinnati, it's a tough division. They're competing with three really good teams in there. You have to be a special team in that division, and they're just not that.
Yeah, I've given them a D-. I had slightly more hope than you coming into this season for the Browns, because I saw that defense last year play really, really well. I mean, they've got the best defensive player in the league in Myles Garrett at the moment. Yeah. He's going to give you production all of the time. I really like Denzel Ward. They've got pieces on that defense, and they played really well. And I thought, obviously the offense, obviously the quarterback situation is the problem. But I'm just thinking to myself, Deshaun Watson, whether you agree with him being on this team or not, whether you agree with him still being in the NFL, the fact of the matter is he is, and they've got to get on with it. And from what we saw of Deshaun Watson in Houston, he was unbelievable in Houston. And as you said, all of the headlines and stuff, that was a while ago now. And you would think that, what is this, his third year in Cleveland, something like that? Maybe he didn't play 1 year or whatever because he was suspended. But you would think now he would have, this is time for him to step up. And this is the issue that is plaguing the Browns. And again, he was an absolute disaster. I mean, you don't get Nick Chubb for most of the season, but Jerome Ford did a decent job backing him up. It's tough when you don't have your premier running back, but Nick Chubb is getting injured. I read off some of the stats for the defense again. They did okay, but they did take a step back with this offense, which they really couldn't afford to do. 12th best defense against the pass, 21 against the run, 19th overall yards per game, with the 5th most conceded. It does say to me that I think this defense does have talent, and I think the offense is putting them in really bad spots. But there is a losing culture in this building. It's been the same since 2016 or 2017 when there was all that hype with them when they signed Odell Beckham and they had Baker Mayfield, and everyone was saying, oh my God, the Browns are a Super Bowl contender. It ain't going to happen. There is a losing culture in this building. And until they can shake that, they're just going to keep on spiraling, really. Yeah, D- for me. Really bad season for the Browns.
It makes sense that they were 19th against the run when you're constantly having to put your defense on the field because the offense is just horrendous. You're just going to have teams run on you all day. That defense is going to get tired. They can have all the talent in the world. If you're playing with the 32nd ranked offense in the NFL, you're going to struggle on defense. So I don't think you can criticise the defense too much, but you're right. Losing culture always has been, always will be until they
sort it out. Next team is the Denver Broncos. So 10-7, third in the AFC West, made the playoffs. I'll be honest, I slept on these, and I didn't watch a ton of the Broncos this season, but they definitely exceeded expectations with a rookie quarterback, and they only lost one game by more than 7 points this season, which, even losing 7 games, they were competitive in every one bar one of those games. And I think it's really smart coaching from the front office and Sean Payton. I think they go for Bo Nix, which a lot of people said was a bit of a reach and whatever, but they obviously saw his talent. And as you were talking about earlier, you draft on traits rather than stats and film and whatever. And they've obviously seen something with Bo Nix, and they know they have a good offensive line. So they know that he's going to have time to stand there and do what he does best, which is scan the field, be smart with the football, and make throws. Like, he's got a good arm on him. He's decisive with the ball, and he had time to do that. And I think that's why they had success with not a lot of talent at wide receiver either. I mean, Cortland Sutton had a really good season, but other than that, I mean,
Mims?
Yeah.
Is it Mims?
Yeah, he was second, yeah. Mims. I mean, one thing we didn't mention with the Browns, and it ties in with Denver, is one positive for the Browns was Jerry Jeudy's resurgence this season. And I don't get why the Broncos gave him away, really, because he could have had a really good season with the Broncos this year. And, Pat Surtain then on the defensive side, he wins defensive MVP. Absolutely brilliant. Denver had 63 sacks this season as well. Third best in points allowed, third best versus the run. Vance Joseph doing a great job with the defense. And yeah, I've given them an A-. I think it's a really, really good season. Obviously exceeded expectations. One thing that I'm not totally convinced with the Broncos about where they go next season, because, as I mentioned, I do think there is a lack of talent, and this kind of free agency period and this draft is going to be huge for them in bringing in some more talent, which I'm sure they will do. But currently, at the end of that season, is it a little bit of a one-off? Is it a little bit of a overachieving season? And are they going to get found out a little bit? We need to see. Also, when I looked at their schedule, they had a pretty easy schedule throughout the season. They beat all of the NFC South teams, which is the worst division in football at the moment. And they played Kansas City when in Week 18 when they had all their second strings in. So the schedule was kind to Denver, but not taken away from that. They had a brilliant season, and it was a really, really good leap up from Sean Payton, and they did really well.
I think, considering where they were last season with the mess that split was Russell Wilson, the kind of feeling around the team, exceeded expectations. I think that's why I'm grading them quite high with an A. I think Bo Nix really surprised me. I don't think a lot of people would have predicted him being one of the best rookie quarterbacks out of the class. Fits Sean Payton's system. Sean Payton shown again why he's such a great head coach. Lets that defense do its thing. One of the best defenses in the NFL. Pat Surtain, easily the best cornerback in the NFL, without question. It's, like you say, how are they going to take that next step up? They need better weapons. You're throwing to Marvin Mims. I mean, come on, man. Like, I think they've signed Evan Ingram, which is a big signing. I think he'll fit the Sean Payton system quite well. He is older and coming off an injury. But, yeah, overall, their 2024 season, though, really great. They've got their franchise quarterback. They've got their head coach. That's all you can really ask for in this league, and build around it.
Yeah, and I totally expected the Broncos to be one of the worst teams this season. Fully.
Yeah.
So you'd allow them that with a rookie quarterback, and as you said, after that horrendous Russell Wilson trade, still recovering from the damage that was. You'd forgive them for having an off season, but fair play to them. They've really took the bull by the horns. And speaking of bulls and horns, we're moving on to the Houston Texans, 10-7, first in the AFC South. I found this hard to evaluate this team really this year. Hot and cold, they get the win in the wildcard round against the Chargers, who probably should have beaten them, who we'll come on to later. When you look at what they brought in the season, they brought in Stephon Diggs with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. That is a seriously good receiver room. And you get Joe Mixon in the backfield as well. That is seriously, seriously good with CJ Stroud coming off the back of that unbelievable rookie year that he had last year. When you're going into that season with the Texans, you're thinking, oh my God, we've got a good chance here, especially in the division that they're in, not the strongest at the moment. But the offensive line was terrible. I mean, CJ Stroud was running for his life all season, and I genuinely think that has helped to his regression a little bit this year. I still think he's had a solid year. When you think there's injuries to all three of those wide receivers, Diggs, Collins, and Dell throughout the season, and a terrible offensive line. I mean, I still think it's a decent season, but yeah, I want more from the Texans. I think some nice pieces on defense. I mean, Will Anderson got his first double-digit sack year, and I really like the rookie Kamari Laster, second-round corner out of Georgia. He looked really good in that playoff game. They were sixth best against the pass, fourth most sacks with 49, 11th against the run. So I really, really like DeMeco Ryans as a defensive coordinator and as a head coach. I think it's sometimes difficult when you step up from a coordinator role to a head coach. And the year he had last season in his first year as a head coach with a rookie quarterback to do what he did last season, unbelievable. So if I'm a Texans fan, I've got full faith in DeMeco Ryans to take this team forward. But this year, I wanted a little bit more out of them, maybe with the injuries that they suffered and the offensive line. Interesting to see that they've traded Laramie Tunsil this week. So clearly they've seen that is an area that they need to address, and perhaps they're looking to shake up that offensive line a bit. But I've given them a B for this season. Decent, but I wanted more from them.
I think it's the easiest division to make the playoffs in the NFL, bar none. You've got the Tennessee Titans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Indianapolis Colts, all of which were disasters last season. So you can't even give them credit for making the playoffs. It's the easiest route to the playoffs in the NFL. I think DeMeco Ryans is a fantastic head coach. They've got a great defense. Nico Collins, star receiver. Joe Mixon, great running back. They've got some really nice pieces on offense. I think CJ Stroud has one of the easiest jobs in the NFL with such a great defense and so many great weapons around him. It's just like you said, hot and cold. Sometimes they look great, sometimes they look terrible. I think a lot of why they beat the Chargers kind of beat themselves in the playoffs. I don't think the Texans are a real playoff team. I think they're kind of mid-table. But they have their head coach, they have their quarterback. There's a lot of reason to have hope in Houston.
Yeah, I think they're in that kind of second tier teams, aren't they? In that AFC, I think you probably put Kansas City, Baltimore, and Buffalo in that top tier, and then below that, I think that's probably where Houston sit. And even as a divisional winner, as you said, that AFC South is not great, and they are not. Even with the other divisional winners, they're not of that caliber yet, I don't think.
Are the Bengals a better team than Houston?
Talent-wise, potentially. Execution-wise, probably not.
You put the Bengals in the AFC South and they're running that division.
Yeah, true.
So.
Moving on to, we're staying in the AFC South. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. I'll let you go first on this one, as these are your divisional rivals.
They've drafted a running back.
Be careful what you say about my Gator.
They've drafted a running back who can throw the 60-yard bomb, and that's about it. That's about it.
They drafted a test on me, mate.
This guy, I hope he takes a step up, but yeah, it's not looking great. Questions around his maturity, like taking plays off because he's tired and things like that. Getting outplayed and outshined by, how's Joe Flacco? 45? He's an old man. I mean, some great pieces in Indianapolis. They've got some solid receivers. He's got Jonathan Taylor, Gus Bradley. I mean, speaking as a Jags fan, I honestly don't know how this guy just manages to steal a career. His defenses just seem to get cooked every season. I know they've had good seasons on defense, and I think they lost Shaq Leonard. I could be wrong. I just think overall D+. I think it's do or die really for Anthony Richardson now. We've seen a couple big plays, but not enough. Too injury prone with the style of play. It was a question mark of a pick when they made it, and I think everything that people were predicting about him as a player is coming to fruition. It would be fantastic if he learns to throw the short and intermediate routes, because like we were saying about Josh Allen, he's got all the traits. I mean, this guy's RAS score was through the roof. If they can coach him, great, but otherwise you're looking at a bust, really.
Yeah, I think the Colts are difficult to evaluate. They go 8-9 this season. They finished second in the AFC South, but I looked at them at the start of this season as a potential dark horse and a real opportunity to do something. But for that to have come to fruition, Anthony Richardson needed to take that step up. And first of all, he needs to stay healthy. And he can't stay healthy again. As you mentioned, the style of play probably doesn't suit him. Staying on the field, and questions about his attitude and his maturity as well really doesn't help. And as a Florida fan, I really, really am rooting for this guy to do well in the NFL and showcase the talent that he has. And it's a really interesting place the Colts are in now. I think where does Shane Steichen go from here? You said a couple of nice pieces at receiver. I don't love their receivers. I don't think Pittman's a great receiver. The Jonathan Taylor having a comeback year is huge for the Colts. But they can't be a team like Tennessee were when Derrick Henry were there, who are so reliant on one player. And I think they're in danger of this offense becoming so reliant on Jonathan Taylor. They've got a decent O-line. Over on the defensive side, I have to talk about my favorite linebacker in the NFL. Zaire Franklin is everywhere. Every time I watch this guy, he ends up leading the league in tackles this year out of everybody on defense. He is an absolute stud. He's one of the most underrated defenders in the NFL, and he partners really, really well with EJ Speed as well. They work really, really well. So that linebacker core is really good. But I think the reason they make so many tackles is because they are forced to a lot of the time. There is runs getting through. There are short passes being completed that they need to react to, and they do that really well. But this defense, 26th in sacks. gave up the 7th most passing yards and 9th most rushing yards. To have those two players that I mentioned, Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed, some of the best, have some of that talent and to not deliver on that side of the ball, is difficult. And the opportunity is there for the Colts in this division. As we mentioned, the Texans are good, but they're not unbeatable. And the other teams are not good at the moment. And there's a real opportunity for the Colts to make a step up. And I just can't see them doing it at the moment, really.
They don't have elite receivers, but I think their receivers are okay. Pittman's solid.
He's okay.
Downs is solid.
Says it all, and I could only name Michael Pittman as a certainty, really. I don't love that receiver room, if I'm being honest. And with all that said, I'm going to give the Colts a C. I think they're in a really interesting position where they could go one of two ways. They could either take a huge leap forward, or they could end up being a bottom feeder. And I think it's going to be a really interesting offseason in Indianapolis. What are you grading them?
C-. I think it all comes down to that quarterback. If he can prove he can do it in the NFL, they've got a star on their hands with all the traits he's got. But until we actually see it, he needs to do the simple stuff, and he can't do the simple stuff.
So moving on to your Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going to give you your soapbox for this one. You have the floor, my friend.
Is F too harsh? I mean, come on. Our owner said that someone in the building told him it was the most talented roster he's ever had in Jacksonville. Keep in mind, we did have Saxonville in 2017. Where to begin? I mean, it just boils down to coaching staff. The roster is talented. I see why someone in the building told him that, but it just boils down to coaching staff. I have no idea why Doug Peterson let Press Taylor call plays all year. The guy just stunk. Doug Peterson's is a Super Bowl winning coach, has proven to be a really strong offensive mind, and he just seemed to go down with the Press Taylor ship, and I really don't get it. He should have relieved the play calling duties from him. Ryan Nielsen was one of the worst DCs I've seen. This man turned up with a mustache, and that was about it. That was his season. He was terrible. I think people will criticize Trevor, but time and time again, we put him in really shit positions. I think there's a lot to be excited about for the upcoming season because there is talent on the roster. Brian Thomas Jr., in my opinion, best rookie receiver last season. People will disagree.
I think Giants fans will argue with you on that one.
I mean, yeah, BTJ was special, is special. We've got a couple nice other pieces. Tank Bigsby showed he could run the ball and run the ball hard. Our defense, I can't judge any of the players on defense last season. I think it just came down to scheme and just the overall culture in the building. I mean, from the top down, we had Trent Baalke, who was just an absolute snake, and just there's so many reasons why coaches do not want to work with him, and it showed why. Disagreements from top to bottom on who to draft. There was no continuity, and we saw the result of that. And it's a shame because at the start, we started last year at 8-3, completely bottled the latter half of the season. Coming to this season, the coaching staff gets another chance because we started so well, and it just was a complete calamity. Against your Dolphins, that first game, we started off hot. We were smacking you about, and then Travis Etienne fumbles the ball in the back of the end zone, and it was just terrible. Just terrible season overall. F.
As you covered there, dreadfully disappointing season for the Jags. Lawrence does get injured, but even then, you were 2-7 when he got injured. The defense, awful. I mean, second most yards allowed, worst against the pass, sixth most points against. And one of that is like Josh Hines Allen drops to 8 sacks off 17.5 last year. I mean, that's a drop, a serious drop. When we said last year, you must have been really high on Hines Allen last year, the year he had, and yeah, the only caveat really is BTJ, who I agree. I don't know whether I agree with you that he was the best rookie wide receiver, but he certainly was in that conversation. And I was just looking at your stats. I mean, ETN was terrible. He took a huge step backwards. Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram did get injured, so that there are injury issues there. But Parker Washington finishes as your second best receiver. I mean, yeah, not great.
He cribbed a punt. You guys, good player.
There you go.
And on your Josh Hines Allen point, to reiterate, I cannot judge individual defensive players based on this. Hines Allen is worth all the money in the world, and I think he is a fantastic defensive end. And I think he will have a bounce back season this season, and people will go, okay, that 8.5 was just given the context of how the team was shaped up last year. Trevor, this guy plays through injuries all the time, and it was telling when he decided to get season-ending shoulder surgery. That coaching staff could have been fired mid-season. We just rode it out into going into this season and being able to fully evaluate all the potential candidates rather than hiring someone mid-season as a stopgap. So, yeah.
And you might have already answered my question here, but I've got written down Trayvon Walker gets 10.5 sacks. Is that enough for a number one overall pick in where he's at? Or, as he kind of alluded to, you think you can't really blame any of the individual players. It's the scheme that's been wrong. I mean, that's still a good return, but I'm just wondering whether is that number one pick overall worthy?
I have no issues with our edge rushers. I think they're both really good players. People will... Trent Baalke picked Trayvon Walker just based off of measurables. I think he was number one in the relative athletic score since the combine, if I remember correctly. Freak of nature, long arms, whereas you look at Aiden Hutchinson, short arms, and that's why we picked Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. Unfortunately, he'll always be compared to Aiden, and Aiden's clearly shown to be a great defensive end. Obviously got injured this season. But then you put it into context. How many passing downs are the Lions facing? And how many passing downs are the Jaguars facing? And that's why context matters. Most teams are running all over the Jags, and most teams are hopelessly trying to pass against the Lions and catch up when they're down 50-0. So,
yeah, for the Jags, I've been slightly more generous than you have. I've given them a D, just because I think there's, Lawrence getting injured, and the pickup of BJT kind of supplements that a little bit. But yeah, I'm giving them a little bit of leeway. It probably could be worse. I'm being a bit generous maybe, but I've given them a D. Moving on to the Super Bowl runner-up, Kansas City Chiefs. No three-peat for them this year. 15-2 though in the regular season, and one of those losses was with the second strings out. So almost really a.
Do the referees get a separate grade?
We'll go on. I think, okay, we can address the controversy around the Chiefs with the ref gate and all of that. But one thing, and whatever your opinion is on that, one thing you can't deny is this team is extremely well coached, extremely well drilled, and they are a winning machine. We talked about, Cleveland having a losing culture in the building earlier, and this team has the exact opposite. There is a winning culture, 15-2. And those games they didn't blow many opponents out this season. Those were tough games where the opponents were in. This was probably one of the Chiefs' ugliest seasons in terms of their actual play, but their record is probably one of the best in the regular season, and they just find ways to get it done. I mean, Mahomes' production was down again this season slightly, but it's still enough to keep the offense ticking over. Pacheco, I think, was a huge miss. Him getting injured, he's a huge part of this offense, I feel, and only played 7 games in the end. Kelsey has now obviously become the number one target, and his production has gone down. But I think bringing in DeAndre Hopkins will help with that. I know DeAndre Hopkins is getting up there in age, but he's still a very good wide receiver who will command a lot of attention, and that may free up Kelsey should he choose to come back next year, which it looks like he is for at least one more year. And yeah, I think it's another stellar season for the Chiefs. We all get bored of watching them just win all the time, but this season's been overshadowed by that Super Bowl performance, and I think I've given them an A- for this season just because they're expecting to win, right? And other than that, it's a pretty perfect season. But Steve Spagnuolo produces another top 10 defense, and partnered with this high-powered offense, that's all he needs to do, really. They're consistently a top 10 defense.
You think that's still a high-powered offense?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
I look at the Chiefs and I'm like, year on year, I'm like, okay, this is the year they're going to drop off. This is like, I look at the talent and I'm like,
he did drop off. Mahomes did drop off. Their offense did drop off.
These games, I'm like, I look at the talent and I'm going, there are blah blah blah, so many more teams more talented than the Chiefs, and they find a way. And it's what New England did. Bill Belichick had a top 10 defense all the time, and then they just had an offense who were consistently good enough to supplement that defense, and it was a winning and obviously a guy who was a winner at quarterback who just won games, and this is exactly what Kansas City have. That Super Bowl performance though was poor, was really, really poor, but you can't really be worried about the Chiefs because you know that is just a blip. They lost to Tampa Bay a few years ago and came back and 1-2 on the bounce. It didn't phase them. So they'll be back again next year. It's an A- for me.
I think that's a fair grade. I'd probably similar A-. Expectations of Super Bowl or bust every single year. They got to the Super Bowl, and one of the worst Super Bowl performances I've seen in a long time. It proves coaching is everything. Andy Reid is the best coach in the NFL. And I know Nick Sirianni just won the Super Bowl, but Andy Reid is by far and away the best head coach in the NFL. Yeah, Steve Spagnuolo, another top defense. I don't think their offense was as high-powered this year, but it didn't matter because they get the job done. And when a team gets the job done, you can only applaud them for it. I think you compared it to the Patriots, and you're absolutely right. We're looking at another dynasty. We get bored of watching them win, but they get it done. They're going to be in most of the Super Bowls coming up. I don't see the drop-off unless they lose Andy Reid. And even then, you've got Mahomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say. No, but moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders, 4-13, another 4-13 team, fourth in the AFC West. I mean, huge step back from winning 8 games last year. They trade Devontae Adams. They fire Antonio Pierce. They lost 10 games in a row. 10 games in a row and then flunked the number 1 pick as well by winning games at the end. I mean, the only kind of good thing you can say about this team is Brock Bowers was unbelievable and looks a really, really good pick and one of the best tight ends in the league already, to be honest. So Crosby gets 7.5 sacks despite an injury. So he proves his worth again. But apart from that, not many positives for this team. The quarterback situation is horrible. I mean, they end up using Gardner Minshew, Ridder, and O'Connell all getting snaps, and none of them are convincing. Let's be totally honest. I don't think any of them are starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Only 19 touchdowns thrown between the three of them this season. Which, when you consider Joe Burrow had 43, is pretty crazy. Poor talent at wide receiver, running back on defense. I think draft and free agency is going to be huge for them. Just not good. Really not good. I've given them a D-.
D-. I think they got
any expectation. I don't think there was much expectation on the Raiders, but I think they haven't moved. Like, they won 8 games last season. They've moved backwards again.
I think it's difficult because why I'm so harsh on the Jags is I don't know if a lot of people had high expectations, but talented roster there. You look at the Raiders.
Is it?
Compared to the Raiders, yeah.
Oh, Jacksonville. Sorry, I thought you meant the Raiders. Sorry.
No. They did have injuries. They lost Christian Wilkins, which is obviously a massive loss, but their quarterback situation stinks. Just terrible team. Not really much more to say than team stinks. They got Brock Bowers. Hopefully Tom Brady sorts it out for them, but... there's not a lot going on for the Raiders, but they've brought Geno Smith in, which see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly. What are you grading them?
See, I didn't have a lot of stock going into the C-. D. Cool.
Moving on to the LA Chargers, the other team in this division, 11-6 this season, second in the AFC West. Jim Harbaugh returns to the NFL after winning the national championship in Michigan. And when I saw that, I thought the Chargers is kind of a perfect spot for him, I think, at that point in his career. I love Justin Herbert. I think he's a really, really good quarterback. And I love that 1-2 punch of Dobbins and Gus Edwards this year that they had. Obviously, unfortunately, Dobbins going down again with injuries. He's a brilliant running back, but just can't stay healthy, unfortunately. And I think that's why he's not in Baltimore anymore. And then Lad McConkey it turns out to be a great pick. And Quinton Johnston, he upped his production as well. So they've got 2 really nice wide receiver pieces there for Justin Herbert to work with. And the defense was absolutely amazing this year. Number 1 in points against, despite ranking 11th in yards per game. Derwin James finally stays healthy. But again, similarly with the Texans, you want more from this Chargers team. You want them to take that step up. And okay, it's Jim Harbaugh's first year, and maybe they will make that step up next year. But that playoff game against Houston was a game they should have won, and it was there for them to win. I mean, I really like Joe Alt, the offensive tackle that they've taken. That's a really nice piece to build around and protect Justin Herbert. But we've got to see more from the Chargers. I know they've got the Chiefs in that division, so it's always going to be tough to win that division. So they're always going to kind of have to go through the wild card route. But I think the Texans were there for them to beat, and they could have gone on a decent run this year and really made some progress. So I've given them a B. Good season and a lot of stuff I've seen, but there is this playoff voodoo with the Chargers that they need to overturn.
Is Herbert an elite quarterback?
I think he is. I think, or he could be. He could be. I really like him. I think he's smart. I think he's got a cannon of an arm, obviously. He's got all the measurables you want. He's tall, reads the game well. He's quite calm in the pocket. Doesn't make too many mistakes. He's got everything you want to build around, I think. But you do want a little bit more out of him as well.
Yeah, I think. What was your grade?
B.
B. I think that's probably about fair. Great defense, good offense. Should have beat the Texans. I think looking at their offense overall, they always seem to have a good O-line and just lack the weapons. I don't think Justin Herbert's ever had that elite receiver. Keenan Allen was great for years, but it's not that level. Ladd McConkey, great, but he's a slot receiver at the end of the day. Yeah. They need an elite weapon for Herbert to throw to. And until they do that, like you said, they're always going to go through the wild card route, and always going to have to beat the Chiefs. And with the team they've got, great run game, great defense. Herbert's a great player, but it's just not at that level.
Yeah, but and it shows how tough that division is. You got 2 wildcard teams in there with the Broncos as well.
Yeah,
coming from that division this year. So, it is really tough. But is Quentin Johnson that receiver that you're talking about? Do they see him as that? I don't know. I liked him out of TCU.
I know you drafted him in fantasy, but he ain't all that, bro.
I agree. He's upped his production this year, which is positive. Whether he makes that step up, I think they need that deep threat. They need like that DK Metcalf type. I think a lot of Chargers
were begging for them to try trade for DK.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of good receivers in this 2025 NFL draft, and you just got to get Herbert more weapons.
Yeah. So you're giving them a B as well. Yeah. Okay, moving on to my Miami Dolphins.
This is my favorite division.
I don't want to talk about it. It's the same old story with this team. I mean, can't get past the Bills. You talked about the Bills hoodoo with the Chiefs. We have one with the Bills. We just cannot beat this team. We cannot beat good teams, full stop. But you've only got yourself. We've only got ourselves to blame, I think, this season. You go into the season with Skylar Thompson as your number 2 quarterback when Tua is 1 concussion away from probably having to retire, never mind just missing time. And I've also seen that Skylar Thompson is now on the Steelers. I think they've signed him. I just don't understand. It's cruel to the guy how this guy is in the league. It's unfair to him. I'm sure he's a really nice guy and he's trying his best. He just ain't up to it. He's not up to it. It's not fair to the guy. And
you think he could do a better job?
I'm not saying that, but it's not far off. And with a very shaky O-line as well. I mean, it's almost guaranteed now every year that Teron Armstead's going to miss time. And you put somebody else in there to replace him. It's not, you have to move Liam Eichenberg around all the time from guard to tackle and to cover. It's not good, and our strength is at DB. Our strength is in our DBs, 9th against the pass this season, which isn't bad. And the defense on the stat sheet looks good, but I think this defense is worse than the stats suggest. Very, very soft in middle coverage, not much pressure on the teams at all. Very little pass rush. Yes, we had injuries to Chubb and to Jalen Phillips, which really, really hurt us. But I'm just tired of the same old story, and I really fear that our Super Bowl window is closing very, very fast. Tyreek, as much as he's a great player, you have to massage that ego there, and he gets that incident with the police at the start of the season, which kind of you hope that it puts a chip on his shoulder. And don't get me wrong, like Tyreek didn't get the production this year because for the most of the year he's had Skylar Thompson or Huntley thrown to him, and it's not a prime position to have Tyreek Hill in. Jalen Waddle gets injured as well, so I've gone with a C for the Dolphins. They finish 8 and 9. Injuries, yes, but I just don't see progress, and I see that Super Bowl window closing very, very fast. And until we can beat the Bills and get over teams who are above 500 and that we should be, we need to be competing with, we're going to go nowhere.
You think Skylar Thompson wins on the Eagles?
No. He is. I would.
Arena Football League level, or because you're saying he's not even a backup quarterback.
No, he's not. He's CFL. He's CFL at best. CFL at best.
Like, he just didn't have an arm, and it's like,
No, the guy can't. The guy can't throw, and it's not fair. It's unfair to him. It's unfair to have. I love Mike McDaniel. I have trust in Mike McDaniel, but serious question marks need to be asked of him and Mike Greer going into that season with that personnel at quarterback. I mean, that is just criminal. That's just bad planning. It's just bad planning. And yeah, I worry about the pass rush. Chop Robinson looked okay, but he's a rookie, and Zach Sealer made a huge step up this year. He's been really, really good with Wilkins going out of the door last season. So Zach Sealer's had a really great year, and he was underrated for a long, long time. And I'm glad for him that he's made that step up to our number one defensive lineman. But yeah, I'm really worried about this team.
I think you've covered most points. You lost your pass rush. You do have great DBs. It makes sense why your defense struggled losing Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Is that a good enough excuse? You lose to, you have to start Skylar Thompson. I think it's one of the more disappointing teams in the NFL this season. They're such an exciting team when everyone's fit and healthy. They should be so much better. You were saying Chase and Higgins. I mean, Tyreek and Waddle are right up there with them. Yeah, probably D-. I mean, you expect so much more from Miami. I think McDaniel's a great coach. You've got some really nice pieces. Achan. I'd love to see you maybe trade up or maybe force you and get Genty.
Well, we've just brought in Alexander Mattison, so he's not needed.
Oh, well, I mean, Madison's brilliant and he's one of the best.
Move over, Janty.
Hey, man, that's my fantasy running back for half my season last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Achan just is not that workhorse running back. I think he's fantastic. Great. Get him out in space, get him in. And McDaniel's great at manufacturing the yards after catch, letting Tyreek, Waddle, Achan eat. You need an every down back as well to go with that.
So you need an offensive line who can move people too, at the end of the day.
And Alexander Mattison is not that. So,
no. Moving on we're going to stay in this division, the 4-13 New England Patriots. I'll let you go on this one first.
I mean, it's Drake May and Christian Gonzalez. That's about it. It's one of the worst, least talented teams in the NFL. Bar none. Terrible. Ramondre Stevenson's all right. Like, it's okay. Yeah, I think Drake May will be good. I think you've got a talented quarterback there. It's just if you build a decent team around him quick enough before he starts stagnating his development. Gerard Mayo, yeah, not great.
Belichick.
The heir to Belichick,
I do feel sorry for him in a way because it's such tough shoes to fill, and that team is in such a state. And then, if Vrabel isn't in the picture, does he keep his job? Maybe.
Yeah.
Have they got Vrabel lined up? I think maybe he's been a little bit hard done by.
Yeah.
But yeah, as he said, this is a terrible team, and they've made very, very little progress. I mean, Drake May was running for his life.
How many Patriots receivers can you name?
Jacoby something Myers, is it?
No, Jacoby Myers I think is on the Raiders now. Kendrick Bourne, like they did have Henry, like it's just
tight end. Yeah, he was their leading receiver this season, and I think he only got 600, 700 yards or something. There is
another player who I can't remember his name. He was all right at receiver, but
one of the most puzzling things for me was they let Matthew Judon go at the start of this season. That easily their best player, and they let him go to the Falcons, which it makes me think he wanted out. He must have wanted out, and there was an issue there with his with his attitude, but. Yeah, receiving core is horrible. I've got it written down. Hunter Henry led them with only 674 yards. Demario Douglas, the best receiver.
That's it. Yeah. That's who I was trying to think of. Yeah.
Defense was horrible. Least sacks in the league with 28. But they might be better off with Vrabel. Is the kind of caveat here, and we may see an improvement, but it's not looking good for the Pats. They make no progress this season. I've got them down as a D. It could be a D- or an F, but we expected nothing from this team. And as I said, I think Gerard Mayo was probably a little bit hard done by, maybe a little bit tough shoes to fill to come in and try and replace the greatest coach of all time and the dynasty that the Patriots had, and with Vrabel in the picture as well. It's tough, but yeah, D for the Patriots, and big offseason needed for them.
I think that's harsh because, the talent just wasn't there to begin with. Mayo was dealt quite a shit hand. Only saving graces was Drake May and Christian Gonzalez. C- D is probably where you want to be. Are they taking Travis Hunter at 4? Is that I think you have to play him at receiver.
Why not?
With how the team is, with the lack of receivers they have.
Yeah.
He'll be a receiver for them. That's the only.
Yeah. Do the Raiders go him as well, or are they going quarterback, do you think? But we'll talk draft later on. But moving on to the New York Jets, 5-12.
You're so excited for this.
Third in the AFC. My top line I've got written down here, Eden. First word, ha ha ha. Garbage again. Healthy Rodgers, who fell out with seemingly everyone. I mean, I am taking great
This
pleasure.
guy's just an ayahuasca merchant, mate. That's just what he is.
I'm taking great pleasure in everyone going, the Jets, Super Bowl contender. Aaron Rodgers is back, blah, blah, blah. They are trash. There's a losing culture in that building again. It's so great to see. They are so talented. They're so talented. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, amongst others. Aaron Rodgers being one of them. And yet they're absolute garbage because the man is washed. He is washed up on a beach somewhere outside of New York or Connecticut or whatever.
Isn't South America getting higher? That's where he is.
The man is washed. He is done. He's an arsehole. He falls out with everyone. I mean, the stat sheet doesn't look too bad when you look at the stats of the Jets, which tells you how toxic this locker room was. You know, when they even brought in Devontae Adams to try and, you know, match Rodgers up with his boy from Green Bay, and that doesn't work out. It's such a waste for the likes of. I feel sorry for Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, etc. It's such a waste of their talent this year, having all of this crap going on with Rodgers. I blame
Braylon Allen as well was a great second running back.
Yeah, there's a lot of great talent on this team, and you know, I'm still going into this offseason now with Justin Fields. I still am wary of them because the talent is there, and I really don't want them to be good. But this year, I'm just going to enjoy it like some more before we start next year. They were awful. It's my first F of this gradings because everyone said Super Bowl. Everyone said Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, and they finished 5-12. So, you know, there was no excuses this year for the Jets, and they sucked. F.
Fair. I think one of the most slow-paced teams in the NFL in terms of offense, just quite old school, which is the tailoring to Aaron Rodgers' style. Super disappointing. You kind of question. I drafted Garrett Wilson thinking, yeah, Rodgers is going to come light it up. I mean, let's be realistic. The guy was 40 coming off an Achilles injury. I think we were all hoping for some.
Speak for yourself.
Miracle. And it just never happened. I think such a shame Robert Saleh lost his job because that defense was nice. And
I like Saleh.
They fell apart when Saleh left. That defense completely fell apart when Saleh left. The offense was terrible. Just comes down to culture, losing culture. I mean, the Jets are going to jet. Like, you know, Joe Namath didn't even win that many games, and yet he's like their most famous quarterback. Like, they're just a bit of an embarrassing franchise, just full stop.
As I said, though, it's such a waste of a year, isn't it, for those guys like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, and like they're so talented, and yeah, I feel sorry for them more than anything. But the stat sheet reads okay, and that just tells you all you need to know about the culture that was in that building this year. And what was your final grade? Sorry,
D.
D. That's generous. Okay. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, 10-7, second in the AFC North. I'm going to give them a B. Very interesting quarterback situation at the start of this year with Wilson and Justin Fields coming into it. I really liked that at the start of this year. I thought that was kind of perfect for each other with what they needed in terms of Justin Fields obviously having a lot of talent and leaving Chicago, not, you know, with some question marks over him, and Wilson after that horrendous stint in Denver. Kind of needed, yeah. I think he kind of needed that that young up and coming quarterback to really push him, because it genuinely, I was in the off season, I was genuinely like, who's going to start here? If I was a Steelers coach, I would be torn between who was going to start, and I think Justin Fields needed that veteran in Russell Wilson to push him. So I think it was a really smart thing for Mike Tomlin to have done, to brought them two together. And they end up sharing the load, putting up fairly similar numbers in the end. Najee Harris put up his fourth consecutive 1,000-yard rushing year as well. So solid numbers from him. It was a really solid season until the last four games when they just completely ran out of steam and lost four on the bounce, and then had a pretty bad playoff game in the end. But Mike Tomlin, again, just proving that he is one of the best coaches of all time. the guy just somehow wins. There were lots of question marks over the Steelers this year going into the season. Everyone thought they were going to have a drop off. They were in the toughest division probably in football, and somehow they've not really done much in the back end of the season, but he gets another winning year, and 10-7. I'm not sure where they go from here. So I've given them a B because I think we weren't sure we knew the Steelers would be decent because they always are, and Mike Tomlin always produces that. And I think they probably finished around where everyone thought they would do. So, that's okay by their standards. But yeah, I can't praise Mike Tomlin enough. The guy doesn't talk; he just gets on with it and wins. And fair play to the guy. And he keeps this Steeler machine moving forward. Whether it's it's small steps here and there, but I think they are still moving forward.
Unfortunately, because of his success, they will always struggle to find that franchise quarterback. They're never going to draft inside the top 10 unless they trade up. Just because the guy wins, he figures it out with defense every single year. They have nice weapons. Their quarterback situation is always shaky since Big Ben's left. I think, B-. Didn't exceed expectations, landed around expectations. Bit disappointing to not do more with that defense, but their offense just a lot to be desired there. They've brought in DK now, so don't know how that's going to work. They're both quite similar receivers. Him
and George Pickens.
Yeah. Is it Russ going into 25?
At the moment, yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
At the moment, yeah. Najee Harris has left as well, obviously.
Are you going to win a Super Bowl with this Russ?
But as you said, I think you make a great point. Is that they're never gonna draft inside the top 10, and the only way they do is trade up, and who are you willing to give away to get that piece, because teams are going to want the likes of TJ Watt maybe, or something like that, or Fitzpatrick, so yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I don't. Yeah, Steelers are kind of stuck in the mud a little bit, maybe, but they're
not a mid-table. Then they are a little bit above, but they will always stay there because they cannot take that next step until they get that quarterback. I mean, what are we talking since Big Ben? Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett,
Trubisky for a bit.
Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. They got to get the quarterback. I don't know how they do it. They've got they believe a lot in Shador, and if Shador drops, you trade up and try to get Shador. I don't know.
But it was Justin Fields not that opportunity.
Clearly, they didn't re-sign him.
Justin Fields is a talented guy for me, and I think there's so much there with Justin Fields. I'm very surprised the Steelers have let him go, really. But anyway, we will move on. Our final team to grade in the AFC, the Tennessee Titans, 3-14, fourth in the NFC South. Not huge hopes for the Titans coming into this season, and they didn't live up to. Well, they lived up to those expectations, and they'll let you take your divisional rivals down.
Well, worst team in the NFL. Will Levis is a walking meme. Like, the guy just stinks. Like, he's awful. He's just a Mayo boy. Like, you go, it's about where we expected them. They had high expectations. They went, we've got L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley, and they stink. And they still kept their head coach. Brian Callahan's there. I think they've got the Chiefs assistant GM to come in now. I just, they're a joke of a franchise. They stink. They should probably take Cam Ward. If they don't take Cam Ward, they're stupid, because how can you ride one more season with Will Levis? The guy sucks. I know you like him, but he sucks.
I don't like him per se. The question I've got written down here is where do you go with Levis? Do you stick with him and try and improve the team around him, or do you go QB again? I don't necessarily love him. I didn't love his tape coming out of college, but I think if you do take him, you've got to give him some time at least. And this is a terrible team. The offensive line is terrible. I mean, I don't think that offensive line has really recovered since Taylor Lewan retired and had to leave. And when I was looking into the stats, though, this defense was underrated this season. They were second in yards allowed, second versus the pass. They didn't get much pressure or anything like that, but for first-year DC Denard Wilson, who was a DB coach at the Ravens before, you can see why they were so good against the pass, getting a DB coach as your DC. It's a decent job done by him. And, when you look, third most points given up suggests to me he's got a good defense going there that, just getting put in bad spots and being, they don't give up many yards through the air, but they give up a lot of points. And that says to me that they're getting put in short yardage situations, short fields to defend a lot of the time. And I think I mentioned it earlier. This team were really, really stuck with Derrick Henry being their entire offense. And they've really, really suffered now for that, now that he's left. Tony Pollard did a decent job this year, but he's no Derrick Henry. And this O-line isn't good enough, and this quarterback isn't good enough to produce the kind of numbers he did. Calvin Ridley did okay, again, with the kind of with the hand he was dealt almost. But yeah, I've given them a D. I think the only I could have gone harsher. I could have gone D minus F. The bit that surprises me is that defensive performance, especially against the pass. I think that is something they can build on, and if they can build pieces around that defense, then they stand a chance. But what do you do with Will Levis? And it'll be interesting to see where they go in this free agency and in this draft period, really.
I mean, you can see why their fans had expectations. They do have a good defense. They did sign pieces like Pollard and Calvin Ridley. They believed Will Levis because he did show bright spots
when he came in last season. Yeah,
but it's proven otherwise this year. And yeah, that defense is great with an awful offense. I think you have to take the quarterback. You can't ride another season with Will Levis. You got the number one pick. You take Cam Ward. You take the best quarterback in the draft class, and you ride with him.
Is it a vicious cycle though of this? The teams at the bottom taking the best QB. We've seen it with Bryce Young. I mean, the Panthers are horrible, and Bryce Young has had a bit of a resurgence after getting benched, and we'll talk about that when we do our NFC. But you kind of it is this cycle, isn't it, of like the quarterback isn't good because the team isn't good, and you put good players, in bad spots, and then you don't give them any time, you don't give them any development, you don't put any weapons around them or give them protection, and then you say that they suck and you move on from them and you're back in the same spot again. So I think there is definitely a culture of that in the NFL these days. It's the same in the Premier League and with the sacking of managers, right? That no manager gets time anymore. There's no time to build. Everything is results driven. And I do think that we are a little bit, and Will Levis is a good example of that, of if they do go quarterback in this draft and totally get rid of him, where they're back to square one again. And they're going to put, if it is Cam Ward, in a bad situation again, and they might have exactly the same thing.
Is it a bad situation though? Because what we just read out.
On offense, it is.
Good defense. You got Calvin Ridley. Okay, not the best, but solid. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, solid.
Yeah.
Does Cam Ward get them over the hump?
We'll see. We'll see if they take him. Anyway, but that has been our AFC grade-ins for the 2024 season. We'll be back soon with our NFC grade-ins. And thank you very much for watching. And we'll see you again.